Well, good morning, church. Good to have you here today. I suppose I should explain while I'm here, while I'm up here today. Every year, the elders will present a theme verse that we would sort of like the church to focus on for the year. So, a brother Peter has spoken a couple times on our theme verse. A month or two ago, he says, "Why don't you explain why we have this?" So that's the reason why I'm here today. Last year, the elders selected Hebrews chapter 12 as the theme verse. The idea of focusing on Christ and how important that is. Now let's go back a year ago. What were we facing? Well, actually, the last 2 years, what have we been facing? Not just here in our country, but around the world. The number one subject, it's pretty obvious, COVID-19. And what's happened with that throughout the whole world and our society. So let's think about that for a minute. What is the Christian response to COVID-19? Is there one? Do we have some scriptures that can give us some guidance? Let's ponder a couple things for a minute. How about the golden rule? There's a reason why this is the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Now think about that in terms of all the COVID restrictions that have been imposed upon us and how it's changed our life. The golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Let's look at another scripture for a minute. How about loving your neighbor? In Galatians 5:14, Paul presents, okay, if we were to take all the law, in other words, everything in Scripture, if you can kind of summarize everything that this represents, what would it be? Well, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And he said, second, love your neighbor as yourself. That really summarizes everything we have in Scripture. Love your neighbor as yourself. Again, think about this spiritual principle and how it reflects what's happened here the last 2-3 years. Let's look at another scripture. How about 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 15, where we're told to seek to do good to others. This is a key characteristic of Christians, seeking good for others. Again, let's think about COVID for a minute. Wearing a mask, social distancing, 6 feet thing. Cleansing, keeping yourself as clean as you can, hand sanitizers, and all these kinds of things. And how that reflects in our Christian life. How about in Philippians chapter 2? I like what he says in Philippians chapter 2. He says, let each of you look not only at your own interests, but the interest of others. Again, I'm thinking of this verse, the way it's worded, in regard to all the COVID restrictions that we've been dealing with. You look not only at your own interests, but the interest of others. Now, in regards to COVID, especially when it first happened, we were told, there's certain pre-existing conditions that people might have that's going to make COVID very more difficult for you. So a lot of people took those very seriously, and you should have. But we also see with COVID, some people were getting pretty self-centered, thinking only of themselves, what they're dealing with. Not necessarily looking to the best interests of others. Very important. How about faith? Here in Matthew chapter 8, Jesus and the apostles are on a boat. Wouldn't it be nice to have a boat? They're on a boat out in the Sea of Galilee. The waves got a little rough. And what is Jesus doing? Sleeping. How can you sleep in a boat where it's being rocked up and down by the waves? How do you do that? Well, Jesus can. He was sleeping. Apostles got very troubled. These waves are not little waves, they're big waves, and they began to fear. And it got to the point, it got so bad, they had to wake Jesus up. He said, Jesus, don't you care? We're about to perish. And what did Jesus respond? He said, will you guys get some faith? He didn't say it that way, but you know what I mean? Like, will you guys man up, get some faith? Yes, there's a storm out here, but I can take care of this. Interesting. Get some faith. Obviously, COVID is a really nasty storm. It's taken how many thousands, millions of lives of people? Do you realize, even in the state of Michigan, right now, over 100 people per week are still passing away with COVID? It is a nasty storm. But Jesus said, get some faith, trust me, stick with me, I can get you through this. But we chose to pick a different scripture. All these scriptures are good. I could probably mention another, dozen or more easily, real quick. But we chose Hebrews chapter 12. Why did we choose this scripture? Well, the thing that draw our attention to this scripture is the fact it emphasizing looking to Jesus. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Because if we don't, what will happen? You end up wandering off. And our concern for the church here and for everyone in general, with everything that's happened in the last couple of years, all these COVID restrictions and all the things that have happened to you, and some really bad things have been happening. Some of you have been told your job is non-essential and you can't come into work right now. So here's $600 and make the best of it. That's what you were told. Some of you are told your kids can't go into school. You got to do remote learning. And all the havoc that causes. And of course, all the shutdown of all the different businesses. Some of us are still working from home. I'm one of those. When COVID first hit, General Motors says you work from home. And I'm still working from home today. Okay, all kinds of things have happened. Now, when things like this happen, you get caught up into them, obviously. It's a big concern. You're trying to get yourself through all this. But if you're not careful, you will take your focus off Christ because your focus has now been transferred to something else. And that's what we don't want to happen. Satan attacked Job with severe illness and all kinds of problems, all in the effort to distract his attention from serving God. But Job was determined to be faithful to God in the midst of his physical ailments and all the hardship that he had to face. Now, in this same scripture, we have basically a sport analogy. He talks about running with endurance. So he gives an analogy here of a long-distance runner. And this is not the only scripture that talks about running. In fact, our brother Matt Byrne just a few moments ago read from 1 Corinthians chapter 9, another good scripture about running. So I'm not going to reread all of it, but I want to point out at least 3 different aspects of this verse that I think is very important. First of all, he says, why do you run in the first place? Well, when you're running in a race, what's your goal? To win the race. When you're in any sport, why are you in that sport? To win. We're here to win. So, that's the first important thing I want to point out. You run to win, that you may obtain it. Now, in running, the second thing I got highlighted there, you don't want to run aimlessly. He talks about someone like boxing in the air. You ever see a boxer when he's going on a run? What is he doing? He's not doing the traditional running pace. He's doing one of these kind of things as he's running. And it kind of looks kind of funny, like, what are you punching in the air for? Okay, it's not a normal running pace. And that's an analogy that's given here. Don't run aimlessly. He talks about discipline, how important discipline is. So let's look at each one of these a little more carefully. Why do you run? To win. You want to be like this guy. Win the race. That's why you're running. Now let's take this analogy and apply it to Christians. Why do you want to be a Christian? Hopefully your answer is to win as a Christian. Any sport you can think of. When the coaches approach the team, what's the number one thing that the coach wants to know? Why do you want to be on this team? Hopefully the answer will be to win. That's what the coaches want to know. Are you here to win? If you're here to win, are you willing to put forth the effort that it takes to win? All the workouts, all the practices, all the strategy that you have to go through. Are you willing to do that in order to win? It takes a lot of discipline. Every athlete will tell you, discipline is the number one characteristic you must have. Now, as a runner, a long-distance runner, many of these guys have to work out on their own. Back when I was running on a college cross-country team, many of the workouts was left up to us individually. I had to go out and do running on my own, okay? There's no one else around. All those thousands of miles we had to run. But it takes a disciplined person to do that. Now, obviously, there's all the workouts you have with your team. That's very important. But a lot of it is personal discipline to go out and do what it takes to win. Every athlete will tell you it's extremely difficult to win. And it takes a lot of discipline and work to make it happen. Now, the scripture also tells us not to run aimlessly. So don't be like this guy. What is this guy thinking? He's reading a book while he's running. Like, oh, I've seen some crazy things in all the races I've ran in, but this is kind of crazy. He's running a book. He's reading a book as he's running. I don't know if you can see it, but look at the guy in the blue in the very back corner. He's going like this. He's like, I can't believe it. This guy's up here reading a book in the middle of a race. What in the world is this guy thinking of? Oh, my goodness. Well, as we think of this, he's given a sport analogy. What sport can you think of that kind of best illustrates the last 2-3 years or COVID? Does it feel like a football game, baseball game, soccer? Hey, World Cup starting this week. Soccer match. Does it feel like a hockey? You might say, oh, it feels like a boxing arena. Man, people are just punching all over me. I think there's another sport that this kind of illustrates, at least in my viewpoint of things, how life has been going for us for the last couple of years. And that's this sport here, tug of war. Remember playing tug of war? Get the big rope, you got two sides. I'm pulling this way, and they're pulling that way, and they're just tugging on you all over the place. Good old tug of war. To me, that kind of illustrates what's been happening in the last couple of years. Get the vaccine. I don't want to get the vaccine. And they're pulling this way, and you're pulling that way, and so on. Wearing the mask. Oh, my goodness. How many tug of wars have we gotten into this idea of wearing the mask or not? People are just pulling you in one direction, and you're like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to pull in this other direction. And you're pulling back and forth, back and forth. Good old tug of war. Well, tug of war hasn't just been with adults. What's been happening here the last few years, really maybe even longer, is that we have kids involved in this tug of war match. Now you realize I'm speaking sort of in a bit of a metaphor here, this game of tug of war, right? I'm not talking about literally you grabbing a rope. But you know what I mean by you're being pulled in a certain direction. People want you to do this. I don't want to do that. People want you to do, all the back and forth that's going on. Well, kids have been involved in this little game of tug of war. It's been amazing what has happened to our children in the last 2, 3, 4 years or whatever. Now, remember when the COVID restrictions hit, schools were closed down, kids had to do what? Remote learning. Well, we now know the results of that. Well, you talk about a failing grade, here you go. It's extremely troubling to see what's happened to our children here in the last year or 2 years from their educational standpoint and development standpoint. This idea of remote learning just has not worked very well. But it's more to it than that. Here lately, the tug of war has taken a sort of a different tone. How about this transgenderism? Stuff that's being pushed on the children. This is pure evil. Trying to convince these kids they're not who they are. Jesus said, if you cause one of these little ones to stumble, Jesus said, you need to go for a swim with a millstone hung around your neck. You seek to destroy and pervert these children. So we need to watch this closely. Right now, what's happening with some of our children? Have you ever heard this term, RSV? A lot of our hospitals right now are being overrun with children with this respiratory virus. It's not COVID, it's a different type of a virus. So our children really have a tremendous challenge today, and we need to watch out for them. Okay, so what team are you on? Huh? You want to pick a side? What team are you on? You play this game tug of war enough, the results are quite predictable. Yeah, you get drugged through the mud. It's quite predictable. You're going to get drugged through the mud playing this game of tug of war. Let's return to our theme scripture for a minute. Looking to Jesus. Here's the focus point that we really wanted. With all this crazy stuff going on in our society, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Now, there's some very good reasons for that. Now, we need to ask ourselves some key questions. What is our eye fixed on? I got my phone with me, smartphone. This is an amazing piece of technology. In many ways, it has improved your life. But in some ways, we need to question a few things. How much time do you spend on Facebook? How about Twitter? Isn't it fun what's going on with Twitter right now? We'll see how that shakes out. How much time do we spend on TikTok? I understand, I've never done TikTok, but I understand it's extremely addictive, and people spend hours and hours and hours on this stuff. Okay, if you're spending so much time on your phone checking out all these things, what are you not doing? How about basic communication with husband, wife, children, grandkids, people in your house? How about church? How about Jesus? How about God? If you're spending all your time on social media, well, obviously you're not having your focus on some things that you should be as a Christian. Let's talk about eyes for a moment, keeping your eyes focused. A couple of sports here really illustrate the importance of eye focus. How about archery? Extremely important. Your eyes are focused on right on that target. You're not looking at anything. Look at the eyes here. Look at the eyes. Look how focused they are. You have no chance of hitting the target if you're not focused on it. Intense focus on the target. How about tennis? Yeah, even tennis. You got to keep your eye on that ball again in order to strike the ball. Keeping your eye on the ball. I like tennis. Tennis is a good sport. How about baseball? Probably no other sport where good eyesight is extremely important than in baseball. Now, what do we teach the boys and girls when they're very young? We're teaching them baseball. What is the one thing that we tell them over and over and over again? Keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on the ball. Watch the ball as it's coming to you, then swing at the ball. And also when you're catching the ball, keep your eye on the ball, keep your glove open, ready to catch the ball. It is extremely important. You look at the pro athletes today in baseball. Here's one thing you never see, or rarely see, a baseball player wearing these corrective lenses. Their eyesight is extremely good. And it must be. That ball's coming at you at 90 miles an hour, and it's spinning, and it's moving. And you better have good eyesight on it if you have any chance of hitting that ball. Any chance of hitting it. It's extremely important. Keep your eye on the ball. How many times have you seen an outfielder? I'm always amazed at this. The ball's hit into the outfield. You'll see one of the outfielders. He runs. He dives through the air and makes that catch. It's like, awesome. How do you do that? If you look at the replay, his eyes are fixed on that ball. You must keep your eye fixed on that ball. So you want to be like this little boy. I like this little boy. Look at that. He has his glove open. His hand is there ready to trap the ball in the glove. But look at his eyes. Look at his eyes. He's focused right on catching that ball. This is what we want. Keep your eyes fixed on that ball. Now, don't be like this guy. Okay, when we say keep your eye on the ball, now this guy maybe got a confused message. Because if he would have kept his eye on the ball, he would not have gotten his eye on the ball. And like, oh, so this is not really what we mean by this statement, keeping your eye on the ball. I'm kind of intrigued by the lady behind him. Like, yay, 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 and like, ooh. If he would have been keeping his eye on the ball, he probably would have ducked. Then what would have happened? Like, oh boy, that would have been that would have been trouble for her. Okay, there's three important critical points that running and Christianity have in common. That is the start, the middle part of the race, and the finish. Let's go to the start for a minute. It's very critical you get off to a good start in running a race. It depends on the length of the race, more critical than others. Obviously, if you're doing like a 100-meter sprint, you must get a good start because there's no room to make up anything. So you have to come out of them blocks strong, good, in order to make the race. On some longer races, it's still extremely important that you have a good start. Most of the races I ran in, especially my college races, were all 5-mile cross-country races. That first mile is extremely important. Get off to a good start. If you don't, you're going to be so far behind, okay, you're not going to be around. You got to have a very good start in any race. And actually not just in running, but basically any sport you can think of. Getting off to a good start is extremely important. That's what the coaches want, and that's your best chance of gaining the advantage and winning. Getting a good start. Now, as Christians, what does it mean getting a good start? Okay, you now dedicated your life to Christ, baptized into Christ. Now you're starting off in your Christian race, in your Christian walk. What's important? It's important to develop some very good habits, like maybe Bible study, prayer. How about church attendance? All those things are critical as you start off in your Christian life. So get off to a good start in your Christian life. Now, let's talk about the middle part of the race for a minute. Call it the pace. Here's just a picture. It looks like a ladies' cross-country race, what I can tell by the photo. I chose this photo because you notice they're running downhill. Turn the corner there and they run uphill. Our life as a Christian is sort of this way. There's ups and downs. Your pace is going to change accordingly. Now, I can tell you running downhill is far more difficult than running uphill. You think, oh, that should be easy. You're running downhill. No. Let me explain something. In a race, you're running at your particular pace. You're pretty much maxed out as far as your heart and lungs are concerned. Okay? Running a race like this, your heartbeat is way up there, like 180, 190 beats per minute type thing. Then when you're trying to run downhill, it throws off all your pace. It throws off your breathing patterns and everything. Runners like to get into a groove, like to get a pattern, and sort of coast at a certain level. When you're running downhill, it throws it all off. So it's very difficult running downhill. Notice it looks like some water there you got to run through. Oh, you got a hazard here. You got to get through. And then you run uphill. Running uphill's not easy either. Well, I chose this photo because it sort of typifies our life as a Christian. You're going through the race, and there's times ups and downs. But here's what's critical. Never stop running. Keep going. Yes, your pace might have got thrown off. You got to sort of regroup for a minute. Keep going. Never stop. Now let's look at another critical part, the finish. This is really what it's all about. Finishing the race. My high school track coach, he always insisted, finish your race. Now he says that because he's seen, especially in younger kids, like in junior high level, you're running, then as soon as you see, oh, I'm not going to win, and you just want to quit. You just want to stop. No, no, no. Never, ever give up. You give 100% of what you have in that race. It's extremely important you make it to the finish line. It's important from a track and cross country standpoint because these are points that are awarded, and you look at the team competition and all that kind of thing. It's extremely important that you finish the race. I kind of like this photo. It looks like a senior here. I think that number is 84, if I'm seeing it correctly. Yeah, 84. I wonder if that's his age or just his race number. Wouldn't it be awesome? You're 84, you look that good? That would really be good, wouldn't it? Now, sometimes getting to the finish line is not as easy as it sounds. Sometimes we need a little help. Sometimes during a race, you might cramp up, things like that. You might stress the muscles, whatever. It's difficult making it to the finish line. You need some help. People, you and I as Christians, we need one another to help us get across the finish line. It's important that we help each other to finish the race. You must be determined to finish the race. A few years ago, I was watching, we had one of the cable channels we had was the military channel. And they were showing the tryouts to be a Green Beret. Now, this is really brutal. Okay, the tryouts they have to go through. Well, they were showing this one scene. It was at night. The recruits had to navigate in the darkness, going from one place to another, several miles. Well, this one guy, he somehow twisted his ankle, did something, and he's just kind of laying there like, oh, my foot, you know. Then the instructor comes up and says to him, what are you doing? He goes, oh, my foot is hurting. My foot's hurting, and I can't move. And the instructor says, you didn't finish the course. That was his only concern. Did you finish the course? Yeah, but my foot. No, did you finish the course? Now think of it from a military standpoint. If you're out in the field somewhere and you get injured, you can't just flop down on the ground and sit there. You could be dead. You got to finish the course. Finish it. Be determined to finish the course. So you might be like this guy. Well, I'm not sure what happened to this guy, but I know one thing. He made it to the finish line. And that's what it takes. We have to make it to the finish line. The Apostle Paul said, at the very end of his life, he says, I finished the race. He finished it. Apostle Paul had a lot of difficulty in his race, didn't he? How many times was he thrown in jail, beaten up, thrown out of town? All the hardships he had to suffer. But he finished. And that's what's important. Finish the race. You must be determined to finish. No excuses. Now, in regards to our vision, all of you know when you're having trouble with your eyesight, vision, what do? Well, you go see an optometrist, right? And he does all his fancy stuff and try to find the right focus for your lenses and all that kind of thing. And, the doctor will be looking in. I just had my eye exam about 3 weeks ago. So, they dilate your pupils, and the doctor's looking inside and checking everything out. Well, if Jesus was your optometrist, what would he be seeing when he's giving you an eye exam? Well, hopefully he's seeing this. Keep your focus on the cross. It makes all the difference in the world. With all the things going on around you, and I know many of you have some very serious issues you're dealing with. Keep your focus on the cross. And really, that's the message that we're concerned with. Last year as we were contemplating this, actually, we really need to double down on this. Because if it's possible to look in the future, what's going to happen? Things are going to get a lot more difficult. I mean, we can't even get out of COVID, and we're dealing with inflation. So if COVID didn't get you, inflation has. How many thousands of dollars we're going to lose every year because of inflation? Again, these things get you all, could throw you off course. Yes, we have to deal with all of this, but do it with this eyesight, with the cross of Jesus in your focus. Now, as we go into the invitation, the theme scripture really is the invitation. Notice, why do we focus on Jesus? It says, for the joy Jesus endured the cross. The joy. Now think about that. Joy? How often do we talk about how Jesus suffered for us? He died for us. We remind each other how he was scourged and whipped. We remind each other when he went on the cross, they took those spikes and drove it through his hands and his feet. And the terrible pain that Jesus went through. So where's the joy in that pain? I think the joy here is twofold. One, he's fulfilling God's command. This is why Jesus was born, in order to die. Second of all, this is what's important for you. He's doing it for you. That's the joy that Jesus encountered. He's not thinking of himself. He's thinking of you. That's why it's so important to keep your eyes fixed on Christ. So this morning, think about that for a second. Think about what Jesus has done for you and how we're going to respond to him. So we want to focus on the cross of Christ. We'll focus on our relationship with God through Jesus Christ. So as always, we have an invitation to extend to any and all of us, those wishing to have prayers or concerns. Maybe someone wants to think about being baptized into Christ. All of these are very important. So if we can help you in this way, let's stand and sing. And if we can be a blessing to you, please let us know, okay?